Human life and all other life forms are directly linked with the existence of water. Humans have always nestled themselves on the banks of small and big water sources. Some of these settlements have in the past flowered into history's major civilizations. Human socio-cultural and commercial activities used to be centered around water sources. In fact, the evolution of mankind on Earth to its present stage can easily be credited to the silent waters. The city of Srinagar in Kashmir was born and brought up on the lulling banks of river Jhelum. Emperor Ashoka founded the city some 2,200 years ago. Jhelum starts from a spring in Verinag, 85 kilometers from the city. As it meanders through the valley, it is joined by various tributaries. The river has been witness to the birth and demise of countless souls. Buried in Jhelum's bosom lie great treasures of Kashmir's history, each current carrying with it the pains and the pleasures of the past and the present.
And rivers have a significance in history and in the culture of mankind. All great civilizations have developed on the banks of the rivers. So we have the Indus Valley civilization, we have the Nile Valley civilization, we have the most ancient civilization of the Middle East that grew on the banks of Euphrates and Tigris. Similarly, Jhelum serves as a mark of identity for the whole of Kashmir, Vaitasta, and Kashmir, the valley of Vaitasta. Similarly, it serves as a pivot around which the greatest and the holiest city of the valley, Srinagar, has grown.
Until half a century ago, River Jhelum was the only major source of transportation of goods and people. In those times, jumbo-sized boats, locally called dungas, and khuchas were used for this purpose. They were similar to the present-day dungas, although very little transportation takes place in these boats now. Today, they are mainly used for residential purposes. The waters are a home to a large number of people, locally called Hanjis. The Hanjis were once pivotal in the transportation of goods across Jhelum. These houseboats stay anchored near the river bank, providing access both to land and water. The Jhelum has contributed to the life of these water and land inhabitants in more ways than one.
The Jhelum and other streams of Kashmir were not only sources of water, drinking water, for the residents of Srinagar. Jhelum also served as a means of transportation, as also a source where there were several ghats, which were the ration distributing points. So it had a significance in the earlier days, which part of which perhaps is not there, but its significance remains in other respects.
The Jhelum banks are dotted with these stone and wooden platforms raised from the river. They are locally called ghats. Although they are in ruins today, they served vital purposes of commercial and socio-cultural activities. A significant purpose of these ghats was their use in Valley's public distribution system. Rice, wheat, sugar, firewood and other basic commodities used to be ferried from distant places to these ghats. Apart from being access points to the river, these ghats were centers of merry gossip, recreation and rendezvous for friends.
All necessary commodities used to be ferried in large-sized boats. Rice and wheat was distributed among the population by river transport. Coal and timber used to be ferried and distributed on the river ghats. All necessary items were available on these river ghats. Boats were the only means of transportation available. Everything, small or big, was carried in the boats. These boats used to arrive here from Baramulla, around 50 kilometers from here. And from here, the goods were distributed to every other town of the valley. The water transport was very effective just 20 to 30 years back. We live here since ages. Our forefathers lived here. Maharajganj was the main business center of the valley. All types of business deals were settled here.
Some 60 years ago, this market of Maharajganj was the valley's chief commercial and trading center. The market lies just next to River Jhelum in today's downtown Srinagar. Local as well as outside traders would converge here for supply deals. The Jhelum was once a clear water river. These muddy waters and littered banks of today hardly reflect its pristine grandeur of the times gone by. The people shared a special relationship with the river as they depended on it for a variety of activities, most of which lie buried under the weight of history. Some 40 years ago, the banks of Jhelum were the fashionable areas of the city. These palatial houses, built in wood, stone and brick, once housed the city's affluent families. This is why we find some brilliant architectural pieces and historical monuments even today, right next to the river. These dilapidated structures are reminiscent of a flourishing civilization nurtured by the crystal clear waters of the river. What was once a source of life has today become a diseased mass. Till some 50 years ago, Jhelum was a favorite spot for water tourism and picnicking. The clean environs and picturesque architecture provided a dream setting. Elderly locals mourn the demise of the river, though the young ones have no idea about Jhelum's virgin beauty.
Every country thinks very high of its rivers. It's a pride for them. We know about the civilizations around River Nile and River Tigris. All rivers add to the beauty of the landscape. Here the river has turned into a dumping ground. It's not a river now, it's a drain. Earlier, boats in the Jhelum were the only means of transportation here in the valley. Rice and wheat was distributed through river transport. Lots of locals were associated with water transport. All day, tourists from all over the world used to roam around in boats in Jhelum. Today, no one will dare to touch its water. It's all dirt now.
A network of bridges spread over Jhelum knits various parts of Srinagar into a one big city. No wonder Srinagar is also known as the city of bridges. These bridges are of traditional wooden and modern concrete makes. The tradition of permanent bridges started with the advent of Muslim rule in the 14th century. Today, the bridges form a vital transportation linkage in the city. They also play an important role in Kashmir's socio-cultural and economic life. The constructional styles and designs of bridges in Kashmir have long and interesting history. The advent of Muslim rule in the 14th century ushered in the tradition of permanent bridges to network the Srinagar city. The Hindu kings before this period could not lay any permanent bridges, although they had excelled in stone architecture. The Muslim era brought with it great artistry and sophisticated techniques in woodwork. This is amply reflected in the construction of these wooden bridges. It has taken builders centuries to develop bridges into the present-day concrete style. The wooden bridges were initially made out of a network of wooden beams. These bridges were cost-effective and at the same time picturesque. Jhelum in the earlier times was the main means of transportation. The bridges were therefore built in a way as to allow free movement of water as well as boats.
Bridges in Srinagar city are concerned, they have a long history and a long technical background. You know that the bed of a river is never horizontal or in a trapezoidal form, it is always in the form of an egg. The technique developed in the last many hundreds and thousands of years was that because of the availability of timber of a particular kind called, which has the botanical name of Cedrus deodar, was abundance available in Kashmir. And that is a timber which does not normally get rot even when immersed in water or after certain preliminary treatments. So a raft was made of simple scantlings, partly sawn or partly unsawn, of deodar wood of a particular dimension as was needed at the site of the bridge. Stones would be dumped into the top of this crib work as a float, and on alternate layers you would have this timber scantlings of deodar which would be get filled with stones.
The sides of the boxes were strongly bolted together and the interior compartmentalized with scantlings. This ensured their durability in the gushing waters of Jhelum. These boxes of deodar wood would then be piled up starting from the river bed. Once this pile reached a certain height above the water level, Wooden sleepers would then be placed over them. This way, the river was connected from bank to bank.
This was the technique available till very late, even in my childhood. After that came the era of trestles. Trestles use full use of Devdar wood, that you have a pile which is bored through, which is piled into the ground by the hand of a monkey, made to fall from a monkey by pulling the rope, so that the total weight of that monkey falls on the pile and it gets bored into the soil. That would be one pile, two piles, three piles, or four piles. After they would go down by 10 or 15 feet, and would be determined by the need of the actual site. This was a base of foundation, and in these four piles of Devdar would rise another sawn timber piece, which would be called the trestle part. And in this form, the piles at different places in the same length along the course of the river, according to the width of the bridge needed, would be bored through, would be piled into the ground.
The wooden meshwork of structure was then fitted on the trestles. The builders would make all possible calculations in deciding the length of the trestles, girth of the beams, and other dimensions. All elements of the bridge were then bolted together. Wide and thick, sawn deodar sleepers would then be placed over this network. This gave us a fairly strong and durable trestle bridge.
Because of the span of the two in between, it had one or two techniques called the double-strutted bridge or single-strutted bridge. If the span of the two trestles were quite small, then only one straining beam in the two would join the two trestles, which would be called the main straining beam. But if the span was more, then instead of having one strut which would support this beam, there was another strut which was brought from the same corbelling. Divide this straining beam into three parts.
This bridge in Srinagar, curiously called Zero Bridge, is an example of a double-strutted bridge. It was made some 45 years ago, much later than the other wooden bridges of the city. This intricate network of wooden beams points to a complex engineering design. Although no computing machines were available then, the builders solely relied on their experience and skills in executing their work. The highly resistant deodar wood used in bridge construction can endure the onslaught of water for long periods of time, but not endlessly. Time and water have taken their toll, rendering almost all the wooden bridges unsafe for heavy traffic. But the fact remains that these wooden bridges remain great engineering marvels considering the time they were built in. Not only has the non-availability of deodar made the construction of such bridges almost impossible, but the skill, patience and experience required for making such bridges is missing today. These bridges have been reconstructed several times over. Some of them were destroyed in floods and some in fire. History makes a special mention of the flood of 1893, which washed away 6 of the 7 bridges. Improper preservation methods have also damaged these bridges. Trees sprouting out of the sides of the bridges add to the damage. The famous Muslim ruler of Kashmir, Zainul Abidin, popularly called Badshah, constructed this bridge in what was then the most important part of the city. the bridge was christened after his name as Zana Kadal. Kadal in Kashmiri means bridge, and this bridge continues to be called by Zainul Abidin's name even after 5 centuries. Zainul Abidin's brother Ali Shah made the first wooden bridge of the city in 1419. It was named after him as Ali Kadal. Interestingly, most of the wooden bridges of the city are named after Muslim rulers of the period. These bridges and the water spaces underneath once used to be the hub of many activities. But as the centers of activities have shifted, the areas around them are increasingly becoming deserted. Srinagar once had 7 wooden bridges built over Jhelum, hence aptly called the City of Bridges. These bridges were macadamized with the passage of time. This made vehicular traffic possible, but natural wear and tear and lack of maintenance rendered them unfit for traffic. Almost all the wooden bridges have been or are being replaced by concrete ones.
Now it is the RCC which has completely metamorphosed our thinking. Now it is the Kaisen sinking, that is well sinking. Well sinking is according to the need. You have the machinery which could not be thought of say about 50 or 60 years back. You have that available. You sink a well of cement concrete say about 10 feet high and go on digging inside from the Kaisen, devoting it so that the Kaisen shell goes down itself for the depth which you might have in mind, or you might have designed it, or whatever has been warranted by the survey about the erosion limit. After that, you raise beams over it, you raise now RCC columns over it, and you join the two by RCC beams, and now the time has been reduced. Technique is very far ahead. Much more labor is not needed now.
An interesting addition to bridge construction has been the extensive use of steel along with the concrete. This bridge under construction replaces first permanent wooden bridge, the Ali Kadal. Downstream, another wooden bridge, Nawakadal, has been replaced by a concrete one. Since the bridges have to handle light and heavy traffic, concrete bridges are an obvious favorite with the builders. Not only are the surfaces strong, but the bases can withstand heavy floods. The bridges of Srinagar and the water of Jhelum continue to serve the population, but people seem to be indifferent towards the river. Between Zero Bridge and this bridge, Srinagar city, once knitted together with 7 wooden bridges, today has 12. Both wooden and concrete. This bridge is the last bridge of the city. Today, it is called Safakadal, a corrupted form of its original name, Safarkadal, meaning the bridge of departure.